as always.
Few styles that did exist, and every text align, and we can set that to center. With utility styles complete, we're now ready to finally start applying some styles directly to elements and classes. So I'm going to bring VS Code to the left and go ahead and launch the project to the right. Now remember, we removed the few styles that did exist, and everything we've created so far really doesn't apply to the page except for that reset at the beginning. So we have removed more than we have added to the current project, but we now have variables ready to apply and utility classes ready to apply. But we also want to add what I would call general styles. So let's put in a section here, and we'll label this the same way we have the other sections, or in the same style. And now with our general styles heading, we'll start with the HTML element itself. Now I'm going to use a different color on the HTML element that will be the background for the body element. But if you remember from some previous lessons, we also use scroll behavior on the HTML element, and we'll set this to smooth, and this allows a smooth transition to when we link to other parts of the page. And we'll still be doing that on the home page, this index.html, when we go to the menu that will be located below the big image, and so in the second half of the page. So we'll have scroll behavior smooth, and if I save that, you won't see any changes to the page because that affects more of a behavior. But I'm going to try to save after every property applied so you can see those changes. The next one we'll apply is font size, and we'll use a variable for font size that we already created. And now when I apply that, we'll save, and you see the font size instantly got larger. Size that we already created. And now when I apply that, we'll save, and you see the font size instantly got larger. And that reminds me, earlier when I applied the font size variable above, I believe, or that was in the background color fade. Let me bring this back to full screen quickly because I think it's in the linear gradient. VS Code tried to help me out, and it accidentally added a second var to each of these. That should have been noted when the video was created as well, so hopefully you've already caught that error, but I need to correct it here. So now we just want one var each in that linear gradient, and we'll save. And if we come back now to the page, we don't see a difference yet because that's not applied, but it will be applied here very soon. So down here in the general styles, once again, in the HTML, we have increased the font size. Now let's say font family, and we'll use the other variable we created there, which was FF. And if I save again, we should see the font family has changed, and it does for the page. After that, we're going to set a background color, and this will be a variable as well, and it's the BG color we see here in the list, and I just want to make sure VS Code doesn't add a second var. Now you can see we've changed to that orange that we set, but now this is actually the fallback because we're going to use the background dash image, and here we're going to use that background image variable we created, And we'll find that here in the list as well, and save. And now we should see it go from orange to that lighter orange as we scroll down the screen, and that's what happens. So it's a linear gradient from a full orange to a lighter orange. But this will change as well as we apply some styles to the body. So we'll see how this is going to be applied to the overall page. Now here we're going to have a background dash color as well, and this is the variable. And here we started this with body. So it's the body background color. And now we'll go to the next line and save. I can see this is wrapping just a little bit, so I'm going to press Alt-Z, so anytime it wraps, it'll just go down to the next line for us so we can see everything. Okay, now we want to set a font color. Now, currently, you notice it changed everything because the body is completely over the HTML element. That will change when we adjust the width of the body as well. But for now, we'll just see white again. So now the color for the font will be variable, and this will be the font color variable that we set. And really, we shouldn't see a change because it's basically the default font color of black. Now let's have a min height for the body, and we'll set that to 100 viewport units of height. And if I save, we shouldn't see much of a change because it's already taking up over 100 viewport units of height already. After that, we'll set a max width to 800 pixels. Now, I'm not sure of the width here to the left, but we can see really 800 pixels is still within the range of this. So let's drag this over and look at the full page expanded now. And now we can see here was the 800 pixels, and now we see the HTML element behind that goes ahead and expands to the full width of whatever viewport is available. So we see that orange, that linear gradient fade here. We will change this so the body will be in the middle, and we'll see orange to the left and the right. I'll move this back to the right for now. And now underneath this, we need to define a couple more things. One is going to be the margin for the body. 0 on the top and bottom, but auto on the left and right will center this. So when I save, again, we don't see the change here, but when I drag this over, we now see the body is centered. Bringing this back to the right, we want to add some borders, a border on the left and the right. So I need to set a borders variable and a border color variable. So I'm going to scroll back up here to the colors, and let's set this border color variable first. So we'll say border dash color. And this is going to be a flat black, so 333 for the hexadecimal. You can see it's a flatter black compared to the true black that's above it here with a 000. Then I'm going to put in another comment here and just put borders. Some might put the border color under borders, but I want all of the colors grouped together, so that's just my preference. Now here for borders, let's go ahead and set this borders variable that we might use more than once in our project as well. And this is going to be 1 pixel solid. And now let's go ahead and use the borders color. Color variable that we created. Now VS Code once again put in 2 vars, so I have to watch out for that when I've already typed var. Sometimes it wants to insert that for me. Okay, we've created a border color variable and a borders variable. We'll scroll back down to the body element, and to finish out the body element, we're going to say border left. We're going to set this to borders, and now I'm going to press Shift Alt in the down arrow, so it just copies that down because I also want a border dash right, but I don't want it on the top or the bottom. And then I'm going to set, well, let me go ahead and save. And if I bring this over, you can probably see the borders just barely outlining the left and the right. But now I want to set a box shadow as well on the body. And that will be 0, 0, so what we would typically see for the X and Y. But then there's a blur, and I'll set that to 10 pixels, and I'll use that border color again. There we go, and save. And now, of course, we can't see it here, but when I drag this back over, we can see there's a little bit of, and save. And now, of course, we can't see it here, but when I drag this back over, we can see there's a little bit of blur along each side, and that's what we want, just a nice subtle effect. So as we scroll the page, and we'll see it stand out even more on this lighter orange at the bottom, you can see the blur along the left and the right of the body here, where we have our center column. Okay, dragging this back, I'm going to scroll for some more room, and then we have just a few more general styles to apply before we get to classes and the different sections of the page. Let's have our, I want lowercase here, H1, H2, and H3 headings on the page. We're going to apply the font family, which was for the headings, so that's dash dash FF, and then we'll select headings, and that will change the headings font. You can see that change on the page immediately. And then we're going to apply some letter spacing. Now we could do this with pixels or different values. I'm going to use EMs, which would essentially be the same as referring to the font size that's already on each heading. So the spacing will vary based on which type of heading that it is. And if we looked at this as a rem instead of an EM, then it would be 1/10 of that setting. So what we have for the font size already at the smallest was 1 rem, but at the largest it was 1.5. So that could be anywhere from 16 pixels to 24 pixels. So 1/10 of that would be anywhere from 1.6 pixels to 2.4 pixels. But this will just space out this font. And I think this heading font needs just a little extra space. So when we save, you can see the letters have now spaced out just a little bit more. Now I'll select the H2 and the H3, but not the H1. We have a couple of styles we want to apply here. So we have a margin dash bottom. So on the bottom only, we'll set that to 1M. And now we're going to use a separate color. So I need to define a highlight color up above in the variables again. So here we have dash dash, and I'll say highlight dash color, because we might highlight other things on the page besides headers with this variable as well. So I called it highlight color. It's a color I've picked out to go with the orange, but it's not orange. It's 51, 178, 51, and save. And you can see it's a green color, much like we'd see here on the bottle of Jarritos over here. This mandarin has a nice It's a green color, much like we'd see here on the bottle of Jarritos over here. This mandarin has a nice orange, but it also has a bit of a green in the label. So let's try that with the highlight color as well. So now using this highlight color and scrolling back down to the H2 and the H3, we'll set the color here, and we'll be var, and we'll use highlight color. Now that we have that and save, we should see that change on the page. And yes, our Bienvenidos and About LTS and Taco Trivia has all changed, as well as our menu. And remember, this About section is going to get moved to the About page. We just haven't moved it yet. Okay, after the H2 and the H3, I'm going to select the paragraphs on the page and set their line height, which this is something I frequently do. It looks a little bit better, and we'll just set it to a little bit larger value. It doesn't have to have a specific M or rem or pixel here. Line height, going way back to our typography lesson, can just be a numerical value here. So we've set it to 1.5. You might not see much of a change from that, but there's a little bit. Let me take it away and save. And yeah, you might see just a bit of a change there, but not a whole lot. But I like something I do like to add. Okay, the paragraph has the line height. Let's look at our links on the page up here. So these are going to be our main links on the whole project, really. We don't have a whole lot of extra links. So I'm going to select the anchor, which would be a link. Of course, you have to have an href with it, but just to select the link itself. And then we can say any link, which is a pseudo-class selector. And this any link pseudo-class selector, if you remember, selects both the links that have not been clicked and links that have already been visited. And so here we'll say color. And now we're going to need to set a link color variable as well as hover and active. So I'm going to scroll back up and find that colors list of variables, and we'll go ahead and set the link color variable, link dash color. And this will just be a black color again. And then we'll set also link dash hover. And here we'll use HSLA, which will allow us to have a black color, but then we'll also have this transparency, and I'm going to say 0.6. So it's 40%. Transparent and 60% visible, essentially. After the link hover variable, we'll also set a link dash active, and for that, we're going to set it to orange. Which is the same as that HTML background. Let's save those three variables and scroll back to our links that we're styling. And here for link color, we'll say var and then dash dash link, and it is our link color that we're selecting. Also, let's say the focus might remain focus, but here I'm going to use focus visible, which the difference is the focus might remain on the selected element. However, focus visible, after it's used, it will change. And it might not make much of a difference in this project, but it's something I have started to use more and more instead of just using focus. So here I'm going of a difference in this project, but it's something I've started to use more and more instead of just using focus. So here I'm going to say color var, and we'll set this to, once again, link, but it's link hover, and we'll put the semicolon after that as well. We can save those changes. We see we've got black links here. The hover, of course, is already working, so you can see it fade now as we hover over each one of those. But then after both of those, we still need the active state as well. So we have the active pseudo-class selector, and here we're going to say color, and not color with parentheses, color, and then var, parentheses, dash dash link, and it's going to be active. There we go. Save. And so now if we were actively selecting a link, so when I click on it, you can see it turns orange, and menu, it's still fairly small up here, but when I hold down the mouse button, the link turns orange. And now our general styles are finished for the project. So we are ready to move on to the header section. So I'll add a label inside of our style sheet for the header. And then we will start applying styles to the header section. I'll scroll up so this header is at the very top here, and well, at the very top, there we go. And then the first style we'll apply is now to the header class, because we started using BEM, the block element modifier naming convention, when we get to the sections. And the first one we applied that to was the header. So we'll say position, and we'll make the header a sticky positioned element. We'll put the top at 0, so it's at the very top. And then we need to put the Z index to a setting of 1, so it stays on top of everything else that might scroll under it. And when I save, we don't see much of a change yet, but we certainly will soon. The next thing we'll style is the header, 2 underscores, and the H1, so the title of the page itself. And here we're going to say text align, and we'll set that to center and save, and you can see that text did center. Now we've got just a few more variables to add, so I'm going to scroll back up to the variables once again, and we're at the colors list, and I'm going to add a header-bg color. And here we're going to set that background color to black as well. After that, we'll set a header-color, and I'm going to set that to white. And then after the header color, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and set a nav background color and set that to white also. So we've set 3 new colors there. Then underneath the border section, I'm going to add another label and say standard padding. And I'm going to create a couple of variables. Here. So padding, let's say -TB, and that means top bottom. So you might want to abbreviate that differently to communicate that better. I just happen to use that abbreviation this time. I'm going to set this just to 0.25 EM. And then the next one is padding-side, not size, but side. So on the left and the right. And differently here, I want this to be 2.5%. So total, if I apply this to both sides, it will take up 5% of the width. If I'm going to save that, you won't see a change applied because we haven't applied any of these variables yet. And then while I'm here, one more to add will be a standard margin. And underneath that, we'll just say margin variable. And I'm going to use clamp again here. So at the smallest, it will be 1 EM, and then we'll set it to 2.5 viewport height units, and then 1.5 EM will be the largest. it would possibly be. Now that this is for the top and the bottom. On the left and the right, I'm going to set it to 0. So even though that wrap what we did was apply clamp to the first value of the margin shorthand, and then we applied 0 to the second value, which would be the left and the right. Okay, with those variables defined now, let's scroll back down to that header section where we were applying other styles. So we had the header and we were at the header H1. I'm going to apply the background color now, so I'll say background-color. This will be var, and then we'll have our header background color that we could select, and I'll save, and we can see that change. Now it is all black, so we need to apply a color, and this will be var as well. Well, 2 dashes and header color. And now that we've selected that, we will save, and now we can see welcome to the little taco shop across the top once again. After the color, let's apply some padding. And we're using the shorthand here for padding. So we'll say var, 2 dashes and padding, and this will be top and bottom first, and then we'll say var, 2 dashes. Dashes for padding, and this would be the padding on the sides, and we'll save, and we got just a little bit of padding now to apply itself to the top and the bottom, left and the right for the header. It looks like I'm not closing that out properly, so I'll put that extra curly brace. There we go, and we're finished with the header H1 now. So now let's move down to header, 2 underscores, and nav. Now for the nav, we're going to have a separate background color variable that we created, so var, 2 dashes, and here it will say nav background color. And now now, something to discuss quickly. You may be wondering why I created these extra variables, and yet some of them have the same color values. Well, I'm specifically naming them so I know where they apply. And later on, when we create a dark mode, they may vary more than they are varying now in the light mode. So it's good to have that extra control and extra labeling over these color variables. Okay, now that I've applied that background color, let's add a border. I want lowercase here, border-bottom to our nav. And there I'm going to say var and apply that borders variable that we created. So there's borders. And I can save that, and we now see a line across the bottom here of the nav because it's also within this header element. And then after that border, let's say font-weight. We'll set that to bold. When we save, we should see those links change a little bit. The font definitely changed there. And what else can we apply? Let's say box-shadow, 0 for the X, 6 pixels for the Y, 5 pixels for the blur, but this is going to be a shadow that looks like it's coming straight down. So then we'll also set a -5 pixels, and that offsets that blur. And then we'll have var, and we'll set the color here to the border-color and save. And now we get this nice little straight down shadow underneath that bottom border of the navigation, but also essentially the header itself. And finally, we need to style the unordered list. So adding the header, 2 underscores, unordered list. And here we'll start out with some padding, and I'll say var -- padding, and this would be the top and the bottom. And then once again, we'll say var -- padding, and this would be the side value. Save that. Now you can see those dots for the unordered list were brought back in, so we know we've added that extra padding. It has just a little more room. But now let's say list style type. We'll set that to none, which should remove those dots beside each list item. Now a display of flex, and when I save, you'll see that change because it instantly makes it a row by default. We'll say justify content space dash evenly, and we'll save, and now it spaces out those items. And then let's add a gap, and let's call the gap 1 rem. So what we expect there, and so we definitely have a gap between those items, even if they were all squeezed together if the screen got smaller. And now a couple of quick notes on the header before we move on. One is we did learn how to make an animated mobile header, but we're not applying it to this project because it would essentially be overkill. We've just got the 4 links and 4 pages to the project, and we can easily link to those on mobile or in desktop by just listing them out here on the page. So you don't always have to apply everything you know how to do to every project, and I didn't want to do that to this project, and it's worth noting why. Also, we previously had welcome to the little taco shop across here, but that's really a lot. So quickly, I will open the file tree, go to the index.html and bring this back, and let's scroll up and find our h1 welcome to the little taco shop, and let's just remove the welcome to the, because what we really want is just little taco shop across the top. After that, we can go back to the file tree, once again select the CSS and hide the file tree. I know we're squeezing all the code over here to half the screen so we can see the page more often, but when I bring it back, you'll find that it's not wrapping, and it may be a little easier for you to read. So if you're working on it with me, maybe you're just viewing the code like this. So you can see those longer lines where we've used some variables are not wrapping to a second line now when I bring it over and look at it like this. So I just wanted to show you that. I'm going to bring this back to the left, and now likewise we can bring the project over and look at it in full screen as well, and you'll see it's coming together a little bit better. We've definitely got some changes to make yet. However, this has certainly helped, and if we look at the other pages, since we put in that work ahead of time to put in the correct image changes to the HTML to create those hero sections, and of course apply the classes to the header and the nav as well, we see those changes applied as we go to each page already. So we're making a lot of progress. We just have some more progress yet to make. So now I'll drag this back to the right, and we can begin the next section. And that next section is our hero section. So right underneath our last header style, we'll create a new label, and we'll call this the hero section with the label. And for that, we'll start out with our hero class, which, if you remember, is applied to that section element. And we'll say its position relative because we're going to place something absolute inside of that hero section as well. After that, we have a hero h2, and if you remember, this is only on the home page, our index.html, and that is our bienvenidos welcome here. So after that, we can go ahead and apply some styles to that, and the background dash color for that h2 is going to be a new variable I need to create. So let's scroll back up to this color that we'll have in our variables list. Once again, there's all the colors. So at the bottom here, we're going to call this 2 dashes and hero dash color, and now this color is very much like our highlight color, so it's RGB 51178551. But then we also need a transparency color here. So we could make this RGBA so we can have that transparency, and then this will be 0.75. And I don't need the extra parentheses. So that means it will be 75% viewable and 25% transparent. So when we scroll back down, let's apply this to that hero background color here. So we'll say var dash dash hero, and there's the hero color. After this hero color, and I can save, and we're not seeing much of a change right now, but we will here in the future, we'll say a color. And actually, I'm realizing I just labeled that wrong, and I also need a hero color, but I also need a hero background color. So if I could label those correctly in my mind, it would definitely help us out. So let's go back up here. This should be the hero background color that I just created instead of the hero color. So let's label this BG. There we go. Underneath this, we're going to have a hero dash color, and the hero color itself should just be white once again for now. Okay, now we should apply these correctly. You can see when you get many colors, it can be very helpful to label those and think about them in a good order, and I'm not always doing that even when I do take all the other precautions. So now I've got a hero background color for the background color, and here this should be var dash dash hero color for the font. And now save. And since it disappeared, I think I may have possibly applied something incorrectly even now. So let me shoot back up to the top and take a second look at these hero colors here. And I see what I've done wrong. I have RBGA instead of RGBA. So it just takes one typo to set something off, RGBA. And now we should be good, and we have instead of RGBA. So it just takes one typo to set something off, RGBA, and now we should be good, and we have the green color there. And you can see our green background now for that H2 with the white lettering here at the top. And of course, we're going to change this some more. If you remember, when I previewed the project at the beginning, we saw this is really an animated dropdown. Let's add some more styles to this H2 before we approach the animation. So we'll say padding, and here we'll have 0.25 em and then 0.5 em on the left and the right. Right, we save that. We can see that extra padding applied. Letter spacing, and here let's give this a 0.1 rem. So again, just that 10%, which should space it out just a little bit. After the letter spacing, let's say text-shadow, and so we can apply a shadow to this lettering. We'll say 2 pixels, X offset, 2 pixels Y, 5 pixels blur, and now let's use that border color variable that we have used in the past for shadows, and we save. Now that helps that white stand out just a little bit. It lifts it up off of that green background just a bit because of that shadow. Now we need to say position absolute, and we're going to move this to the top, and it's going to be minus 100 pixels. And first, let me save this before I move it so you can see what changes. It instantly makes it an element that is not in the document flow, and a block element would, of course, span the 100% width. But now, because it is removed from that flow due to position absolute, it does not have 100% width as a block element normally would. Okay, now let's go ahead and move it off the page to start out when the page loads. So this would be minus 100 pixels. But before I do that even, I guess I should show where we're going to place it to the left, and the left would be 20 pixels. This value will not change, so it's just moved in just a little bit. But now the top will be minus 100 pixels, and now it should disappear. And it will disappear. It has disappeared, but it will, of course, be animated and drop down and reappear once we apply that animation. And now we need to create the animation itself, and then we'll apply it. So here, let's say at keyframes, as we learned in our animation lesson, and let's say show welcome is the name of our animation. We'll start out with a 0%. So where it starts out at the very beginning, we'll say the top is going to be minus 20 pixels instead of that minus 100. And now we'll transform. We're going to do two transforms. We're going to have a skew, and that will make that lean just a little bit. We'll say 0 degrees and then minus 5 degrees. After that, we'll also have a scale Y, and we'll set that to 0 to start out with. Okay, after the 0% now, let's say at 80%, and this is where I like to give it just a little bit more than it actually ends up with. So it gives it just a little bit of extra movement or bounce. So we'll say the top is 30 pixels now. We'll definitely be visible. The transform, it needs to start out essentially with the skew again, and we're going to move the skew just a little bit. So I'm just going to copy these so we can just change the values inside. Paste those in, and so now instead of 0 degrees, it's going to be 10 degrees here. We'll leave that at minus 5 degrees, and the scale instead of 0 is going to be 1.2. And now let's get our finishing values at 100. 100% for the animation. Here, this will be a top at 20 pixels. And then we'll once again have the transform, and I'm just going to copy that down. And this would be a minus 10 degrees and a minus 5 degrees. And then the scale is going to be 1 instead of 1.2. And when I save, you won't see anything yet because we haven't applied the animation. But now let's go ahead and apply that animation here. So we'll say animation, and this is the show welcome animation. We'll make it take a half second to complete. We'll start with the ease in. And out transition. And let's give it a delay. Now, I could make this longer to be more dramatic, but let's give it, say, a 1 second delay. So we see the page load, and then we get a little welcome drop down. And we'll use the forwards property here, which means it will keep the state of when the animation ends. So it will remain visible as well. Let's save and see what happens. There's our welcome. Now to see it again, we'll have to, of course, navigate away and come back to the home page, but then we see our welcome drop down. That's a nice little animation to go with our project. Now let's move this over to a full screen. And of course, this is how it appears here. But if I go ahead and press Control, Shift, and I, or we were to right click and choose Inspect, let's choose a mobile device like the iPhone 6, 7, and 8, and make sure it's still positioned correctly. I can go to 100% view. We can see it a little bit better. Let's reload. And there's our welcome. So yes, it's not crowding into the image too much, and everything looks good. It's always good, of course, to check your mobile design as you go. And I've been leaving the screen open so we can see everything. But typically, I do design for the smallest first, and you do want to check this along the way, and we will continue to check it. So for now, I'm going to go back to full screen. And drag this back over to the right. With the animation complete, I'm going to drag VS Code back over to full screen now, and we need to look at a couple of sections in the HTML that are on every page before we get to specifics about each page. And those remaining sections are the main element and the footer element. So let's go to the footer of the index HTML first, because I usually like to style that after the header. So once we get down